Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Monday, August 11th, 2025. Larry Johnson will be with us in just a moment on Putin knows his history. Does Donald Trump? But first, this. Why do so many financial experts call silver the most undervalued asset today? Because silver is essential to the future. From solar tech and electric vehicles to the explosive growth of artificial intelligence, demand is rising fast, and yet silver is still trading at a bargain. With billions pouring into AI, silver prices have only one place to go: up. Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, says silver may be the most overlooked opportunity on the market and could double or triple by 2026. I believe in hard assets like this bar of silver. You can hold it in your hand or put it in your 401k or IRA. That's why I urge you to call my friends at Lear Capital and get their free report, The AI Revolution, and see why silver prices are set to soar. Call 800-511-4620, 800-511-4620, or go to LearJudgeNap.com. Don't wait. The government can print dollars, but it can't print silver. Larry Johnson, welcome here, my dear friend. What bargaining chips does Donald Trump have to negotiate with Vladimir Putin? You and I have been all through Western Russia. The sanctions haven't laid a glove on them.
Yeah, none. He has no leverage. He has the ability to stop the bleeding of the Ukrainians by putting an end to military aid, but there are no sanctions he can levy on Russia that's going to change anything. There's hardly any trade anymore between Russia and the United States. So tariffs, those are ineffective, and his attempts to punish countries that have had close relationships with Russia through BRICS, especially India, Brazil, and China. All Trump has done is energize them to dig in deeper to make BRICS more effective, more powerful, more potent. If you would have asked me a year ago that looking into 2025, BRICS was going to be under the control of President Lula of Brazil. And I would have said, that's going to be a year of inactivity and maybe going backwards. Turned out just the opposite. Once Trump hit Lula with tariffs, not over economic reasons, but for domestic political reasons in Brazil, it galvanized Lula into say, "Hey, we're gonna push back," and so they're making more steps to it grow independent of the U.S. ability to control via the dollar what goes on in those countries. So Trump has no leverage here. It's all in Putin's favor.
You, from your years in the State Department, know better than most people, that when the heads of state get together, there usually is some agreement made ahead of time, and the getting together is to formalize it and let them take credit for it.
Yeah.
Do you think that some agreement has been made ahead of time that we don't know about?
I doubt it. People that climb Mount Everest, they always like to celebrate when they get to the top, take the picture, but they get there because of the Sherpas, the people who actually carry the heavy bags, they carry the oxygen, they ferry that up, they build the bridges, they put the ropes in place, they make sure that all the ropes are properly anchored.
Right.
That's why in the diplomatic world, they call the people that meet beforehand to work out the agreements, to craft out the language. They call them the Sherpas. So there is it's a parallel, and there's no Sherpa work here. So this is Donald Trump foolishly trying to climb Mount Everest by himself. Doesn't end well.
The Sherpas would normally be, correct me if I'm wrong, if this were a normal administration with normal relations with Russia, a team from the U.S. State Department and a team from the Russian Foreign Ministry going over every little detail, every undotted I, every uncrossed T, so that nobody is surprised and their bosses can take credit for it. That is not the case here, apparently.
Correct. Well, in fact, the state would be in the lead, but you'd probably also have, if you're going to be talking some economic issues, there'd be somebody from Treasury. Military matters, there'd be somebody, or one or two somebodies from the Department of Defense. So actually, people with real expertise that understand the issues and that can then craft the appropriate language. And you'd get that from the Russian side as well. There have been reports of some meetings, but it's not clear that they've come up with anything. Now, if it turns out that there's been this secret negotiations underway and that they're going to sign an agreement, then we'll all be, I'll be surprised. But I do not envision, as many in the United States do, that Russia is going to entertain anything involving a ceasefire without its conditions that it's set forth very clearly multiple times for more than a year are met. Those conditions specifically include the recognition that Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Crimea are part of Russia. They are constitutionally part of Russia.
And that NATO will never, Ukraine will never be a member of NATO,
Correct.
and NATO will
Correct.
never put weapons in what remains of Ukraine. That is really, I think, boiled down to two, what had been 5 or 6 of the demands, but it's essentially the same thing. But it makes me wonder, what does Trump think he's going to get out of this, other than the whole world watching them for a few hours?
Judging from what he said and what has been presented, part of this is based on Cy Hirsch's latest piece, where he's talking to someone in the intelligence community. And so I have to assume that if this is coming from what the intelligence community is telling Cy Hirsch, they're telling Donald Trump the same thing. And that is, Trump and his team believe that this is a territorial dispute. This is an argument between Russia and Ukraine over territory, that Russia just somehow needs the territory. That's not it at all. Not even close. It has nothing to do with territory. It has
Larry, that is the real estate developer mentality of the president and of Mr. Witkoff.
Yeah. And he thinks, we can cut a deal where you give up this piece and take that. That's not it. This is about NATO expansion to the east. And while Witkoff is in Moscow trying to cajole Putin into a meeting, and at the same time as that's happening, Trump is preparing to welcome the presidents of leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan to Washington, signing the deal. And the reports are within that deal, kept secret, is the intent to invite them and to make them members of NATO. The goal of surrounding Russia, the United States has not backed away from that. The United States is not interested in peaceful coexistence with Russia. And anybody that thinks that that's the case has just not been paying attention to the U.S. actions. I don't judge the words, I judge the actions.
So has Trump totally abandoned MAGA and embraced the neocons?
On this issue, yes. He's and the same with Israel. The supporting the genocide in Gaza. It'd be one thing if the day that Witkoff's in Moscow talking, that Trump issued that executive order declaring Russia an enemy, a national security threat.
Yes.
Now, you can say, well, I didn't really mean it. What are you doing? Now, the Russians are watching all of this, and I think they now realize that they are considered an enemy, but Putin is trying to find a way to keep this from becoming a nuclear conflagration. The reason Trump is now pushing, remember his deadline was initially 50 days. Then it went down to 10 days or 12 days. And then this urgency to get Witkoff over there to beg Putin for a meeting. Well, why did he do that? He did that because the military situation on the ground is worsening much, much quicker for Ukraine than anyone anticipated. And this is sort of, I call it this is a revision of the Minsk II ploy, or the Battle of Debaltsevo, because back in January, February 2015, the militias in the Donbass, with support from the Wagner group that was backed by Russia, they were on the verge of defeating the Ukrainian army. And Angela Merkel and Francois Hollande, the leader of France, they rushed to Moscow and begged Putin, "No, stop. We'll sign an agreement, and this agreement will ensure the peace." And that was the beginning of Minsk II.
Right.
And then Merkel later admits it was just a ploy. It was a sham. We fooled those stupid Russians because we wanted to give Ukraine time to build up. That's what Trump's trying to pull off now. He's trying to do.
I can't imagine.
Of Minsk III.
I can't imagine President Putin being duped again. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
Correct. Well, in fact, Putin acknowledged last year. He said he admitted he had been fooled. He'd been naive. He'd been trusting. I don't see him making that same mistake again. I think he's calculating that he can, because you know as well as I do that the Donald Trump that you talk to one-on-one or in person is a completely different character than the one that plays this character on television. And Putin knows that because Putin's met with him before in a more private setting. So Putin may be calculating that he might be able to talk some sense into Trump in order to prevent this from going where it's headed, which is going to be World War III.
Who stands the most to lose and who stands the most to gain between Putin and Trump in Alaska?
Putin stands an enormous amount to lose if he in any way makes concessions to Donald Trump and that involve any of the territory. Number one, he doesn't have the legal authority to say, okay, we'll give you back Kherson and Zaporizhia in exchange for a ceasefire as long as Ukraine. He can't make that kind of deal. It would be like Donald Trump going to, sitting down with Putin and saying, okay, you know what, we're going to give you Alaska back. Trump doesn't have that power. He could say that, but it wouldn't actually make it happen. He couldn't return Alaska to Russia. I think ultimately, if as I anticipate this will play out, this will not be good for Donald Trump because it will expose him again as weak and ineffective and not able to deliver on his much ballyhooed promise that he was going to end the war in 24 hours.
What do you think the Kremlin thinks of Trump's bluster, non sequitur, self bravado? I mean, he's almost literally the polar opposite of President Putin when it comes to statements in public.
Well, I don't think the Kremlin gets as focused on the particular personality of the president because they've got, they were dealing with Bill Clinton and then George W. Bush, then Barack Obama, then Trump, then Biden, and now Trump again. Different personalities, but it's always the same result. I think they realize that every request Russia has ever made to try to get the United States to stop expanding NATO or to let Russia come into NATO and be a part of the club, it's always been rebuffed, and they've continued the aggressive action. So I think, I think there's just a hope, still hope that somehow Trump will back off from this. But realistically, I would hope that people like Lavrov and Rybkov, actually Sergei Rybkov in particular, I think they have a much clearer vision that, they'll talk to the United States, but they're not seeing any action to follow up the nice words.
Do you think that the Kremlin was concerned about Trump's comments about nuclear submarines?
No. I think they probably laughed at that because they know the submarines are already out there, and they probably haven't pinpointed where they are. So, there are already submarines in position, just as Russia has submarines in position off our coast. I mean, this again, it's Trump. Trump says things like this that for informed people makes him sound pretty stupid.
Is how close is Russia to achieving its military objectives in Ukraine?
General Staff is telling Putin 2 to 3 months. So by the end of October, they could conceivably have completely broken the defensive line. This area that's in western Donbass or western Donetsk, Kramatorsk, Slavyansk, Pokrovsk. There are 3 or 4. This is like the last line of defense, or defensive emplacements that Ukraine has had in position. There's really nothing like it in other parts of Ukraine that are on the battlefront. Once Russia breaches that, and the initial thought was that they might take Pokrovsk by the end of September. It looks like they might take Pokrovsk by the end of next week. So it's accelerated dramatically, and that is why Trump rushed to have this meeting with Putin. They're trying to forestall Russia from breaking through and taking control of Ukraine, all of Ukraine, east of the Dnieper River.
Well, what happens if Zelensky tries to show up? Does the U.S. Authorities even let him land?
Yeah, I anticipate that this meeting is going to take place on one of the U.S. military bases in Alaska, and so not every those don't have regular commercial air flights. So any plane that would be carrying Zelensky, number one, how's it going to get there? Russia's not going to let it fly across Russia, and you basically got 7 time zones to go through to get there from Ukraine. Or if they fly, he flies from from Ukraine into Alaska, well, then you got a really long flight. But I don't think they're going to let him in.
Why do you think the U.S. leaked? Who knows if they actually did this? They leaked that Trump had invited Zelensky. Who knows if Trump actually did? But they did. The White House did leak that. Why did they do that?
Well, because Trump doesn't have control over the White House. So you got people like Kellogg, in particular, doing their own thing, or pushing the pro-Ukrainian line. Again, this is the kind of chaos that is, if you're watching it, particularly if you're the Russian government, you're really not sure who's in charge. And there certainly is no discipline on messaging.
As we speak, I understand General Kellogg is on his way to Kyiv. What promises is he giving Zelensky?
Yeah, well, he may be reassuring him, going to say, "Don't worry, we got your back."
Thank you.
At that point, I'd be afraid.
Thank you, Boris Johnson. Here's your favorite senator from South Carolina commenting on this on one of the talk shows yesterday. Chris, cut number 3.
No, I'm very okay with President Trump meeting with President Putin in Alaska. I think everybody knows that how this war ends can be a good thing or a bad thing. If it ends in a way, it looks like that Putin's overly rewarded, there goes Taiwan. You can't end a war without talking. I do hope that Zelensky can be part of the process. I'll leave that up to the White House, but I have every confidence in the world that the president is going to go to meet Putin from a position of strength, that he's going to look out for Europe and Ukrainian needs to end this war honorably, and it's time to end this war honorably. But how we do it will be historical.
What is he talking about? The president is going there from a position of strength. He doesn't even have the basics right.
Yeah, we can't produce enough artillery shells to supply Ukraine. We don't have any more air defense systems to give them. The weapons that we're promising that we'll sell to Ukraine via the Europeans will buy it from us and then they'll give it to Ukraine. Some of those weapon systems won't be produced for 7 years.
Wow.
So, Trump's going at a time when the reality is the United States is weaker economically than at any time in his first or second term. And the part of the why Trump has been using the tariffs and sanctions, Ukraine is, in a way, is a bit of a sideshow, because what he's really trying to do is disrupt BRICS, because the demand for dollars is dropping. And one of the reasons for that is these BRICS countries, which have significant economies, are shifting their purchases. They're not using dollars. Or in some cases, what you find is the Chinese are holding some dollars that they're using to fund projects in Africa, but that's not benefiting the United States. So from an economic standpoint, BRICS is the real threat to the United States. And that may be what preoccupies Trump, but he's not, as he told Zelensky, you don't have any Trump cards. Well, Donald Trump doesn't have any cards either to play with Vladimir Putin.
Thank you, Larry. A pleasure, my dear man. When we're together with Ray at the end of the week, we still won't know what, if any, the outcome in Alaska is because of the time zone difference. They're not going to be making announcements until late in the day, our time. But we may have to come back on air and analyze it if something spectacular comes out of it, or even if it's just bluster. Whatever it is, we'll get to it. And we'll see you at the end of the week. Thank you, Larry.
All right, Judge. Thank you.
All the best. Coming up at 1 o'clock this afternoon, live from Moscow, Scott Ritter and Russian officials with him from a television studio there. And at 1:45, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.